Welcome to Movie Time Machine, where each week we pick a movie from the past and relive it in the present. This week's movie, Stand By Me, released in the summer of 1986, directed by Rob Reiner, based on the Stephen King novel, The Body. I'm one of your hosts, Chad, surrounded by my other Time Machine host, Chris, Jamie, and Lee. How you doing, fellas?
Very
Hello.
good, thanks.
Happy to be here.
All right, first we're going to start off with a quick synopsis of the movie. If you want to kick that off, Chris.
I'd be happy to. So this is coming from IMDb. So this is Stand By Me from 1986. After the death of a friend, a writer recounts a childhood journey to find the body of a missing boy.
All our lives, there's a fall from innocence, a time after which we are never the same. It happened in the summer of 1959, a long time ago.
Oh, man. Wait to hear this. Wait to hear this. What is it, man?
You guys want to go see a dead body?
You think Mighty Mouse could beat up Superman?
Mighty Mouse is a cartoon. Superman is a real guy. No way a cartoon could beat up a real guy.
On every radio and TV show in the country.
I still don't think we should go.
I like to go someplace where nobody knows me.
We found him. We got dibs.
We better start running, Eyeball. They got dibs.
There's four of us, Eyeball. You just make your move.
You're dead.
All right, so let's start off with the intro. Characters are introduced to us kind of slowly. I kind of like how it's the story with Gordy and they all meet at the treehouse, but it really kind of kicks off when Vern comes in and he hears that the story about the guys finding the dead body.
Off of that, Chad, that's one thing I wanted to mention right off the top that's really cool about King. And I think we take him for granted. Maybe not anymore. But I remember there was a, what's the word? Maybe an everyday kind of brushing off of Stephen King stories. And I think about Vern finding the pennies, the story within a story of Vern under the porch, essentially. How do we hear about this dead body? Like, this is the key event that drives the movie. So how do we hear about it? And it would be really easy to just, tell it any other way. Vern was under the porch, nothing about his motivations, how he got there. But from King, we get, he has his pennies in his jar and makes himself a treasure map, digs his pennies, forgets about it. So now every day he's under the porch. And now suddenly we know about Vern as a character and we have our motivation for the entire story. So I just kind of wanted to recognize King, I guess, in that way.
Right.
That story of Vern just putting his stuff under the porch and really gets us going into the movie itself.
I think that's a motif that happens throughout as well. If you look at the very beginning, like how this story and movie begins is you see the main character, Gordy, reading a newspaper and he sees that his childhood friend has passed away. And so, again, you've got that story that begins it, and then that makes him start thinking about it, and then he starts writing. We find out at the end this story that then kind of walks us through the experience of looking for the missing boy and the dead boy. And then throughout, you see the stories within the stories. You get that, again, with the pennies things. You get that later on when Gordy's telling the story to his friends around the campfire, and it seems like this is a motif that we see often.
You guys want to go see a dead body?
So after they're in the treehouse and like they're talking about it, and Gordy is reflecting on, was that like earlier in the summer about his brother passing away, was killed in the car accident. Then there we kind of get the story of kind of how his dad is like, how come you can't have friends like your brother?
Why can't you have friends like Denny's?
Dad, they're okay.
Sure they are. A thief and two Phoebes.
Yeah, I like that scene when Gordy is looking for, it was his hat, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And he's asking,
No, it was his canteen.
Canteen,
Yep.
that was it, yes, for the trip. And he's asking, basically, the mom and dad, they're outside, the mom just ignores him, just continues to fold, but you look at her face, and she's it's heartbreaking, and then you find out about his brother. And, his dad does help him find it, but not without a price of digging at his friends. Just basically calling his friends that he's going to go on this trip with. Of course, they don't really know that they're going on this trip. Just going camping, but it's he calls them stupid, or no, he says one of the friends is a thief and the others are Phoebes.
So I had never heard that term before, Phoebes.
Yeah, can we get a like 50s dictionary for
50 jargon?
So I looked up on the internet, but it's just a foolish or stupid person, you know, is actually the definition for it. So his dad's basically being just an asshole to him.
His dad's also being redundant. It's not very smart to use like this two things like one after the other. So I mean,
you're dumb and stupid.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
thanks, Dad.
Maybe he could work on his insults.
It hurt the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that always sticks out to me about this movie is just how adult the actual like nature of the movie is. You think about like the things that they talk about and the things that they work through, and even the conversations that I feel like the boys have together. I think about the conversation between River Phoenix's character, Chris, and then Gordy as well, Will Wheaton's character, where basically River Phoenix is talking to Will about being a writer and how like he has grown up, Chris Chambers, his character, has grown up in this household where like nobody gives a shit. He doesn't really have parents that are invested in stuff like that. And he feels like he has this destiny of like, I'm just going to stay in this town. It's going to be, you know, I'm going to grow up just like the rest of my family. And he sees that Gordy has this gift and he like doesn't want him to squander it. And these kids are 11, 12 years old and they're having these large conversations about like how shitty their life is or what their background is and like how they don't want themselves to squander it and they want to see themselves get out. And I think even that is just like such a mature subject matter for a kid of that age. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like going through the death of a family member, of a brother too, it's just, I think they've done a great job of making that feel accessible and feel realistic.
Yeah, even going along those same lines, it's I look at the contrast of the kids, the 12-year-olds, to their older brothers and that gang. Mm-hmm. It's like they totally just gave out.
Yeah.
I mean, they're driving around in cars like smashing mailboxes with their baseball bats, you know, and driving drunk and just basically playing chicken with delivery vans. Mm-hmm. You know? So, you know, the kids themselves, I don't know if they're at the point where they're either going to decide to be like that or they're going to go the other route and decide to go and do something with their life.
Yeah, that's a really neat idea, because I didn't think about that either, how they really have that already, to see like what, like you have a road already set in front of you based on the gang of your siblings and seeing what they do. And again, like they seem very ruthless and very meandering, not really sure what they're doing with their lives. And do we choose that, or do we go the road less traveled?
You know, one scene really kind of disturbed me with Kiefer Sutherland, his character, Ace. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was a scene where Gordy's hat is taken.
Oh, yeah, where he tackles him. And
the cigarette.
But then he tackles Chris, throws him to the ground. He's going to burn Chris.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this. That's his older brother, Eyeball. That's his older brother standing there.
Oh, yeah.
Letting this happen.
Yep.
That's
to me, interesting.
And he's just like not even doing anything. But he just continues to be a bully to the two younger boys.
Right.
You know, so he's already.
It's the same thing with Vern. That's why he's so scared that they'll find out about it, because, you know, maybe you think my brother's going to kick the shit out of me. You don't really believe him. And then you see that scene and it becomes pretty clear that, okay, yeah, he might kick the shit out of you if he finds out you were under the porch and listening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what about the look that Gordy gives Ace and Eyeball as they're walking away with the hat?
Mm-hmm.
And Chris has already, you know, started walking away, and then Gordy's just has that look like he's gonna kill him. You know, you can just see it in his eyes. Thought that was pretty powerful.
Gordy's character in the movie is really interesting to me, because I still I'm curious how he fits into that group. Because again, like you look at like the brothers who, like the two older brothers that are in the gang, you can kind of see like maybe why why Chris's character and Vern's character are kind of maybe a little less, like a little more rough around the edges, what have you. But I look at like, and you can see the same with Corey Feldman's character Teddy. Again, like he has had this really like terrible upbringing, has had a dad who is kind of like known as the town drunk or kind of town crazy person. Like I can understand how those three maybe get together, but then like Gordy to me just doesn't make sense. He has a brother that's an all-star jock. It seems like his family is well-to-do. He's got both parents still together. They're seem really well adjusted. So his place in the gang just has always felt a little bit strange to me.
Is it maybe though because he is the writer? He is like the creative like storyteller, and I think that is that something that's because again I'm just thinking that this is like a small town story, and what usually happens in small towns is usually get like the losers, like the gang, right? Or you get the townies that just do like the job that was handed down to them from like their families, or they worked at the local factory, and it's just like you kind of just go through the same cycle over and over again. So I just kind of see like Gordy as like being like this writer, the storyteller, kind of being like versus at the time when I think a lot of those your career is probably going to be like some kind of manufacturing job or like retail or something like that. It's kind of my thinking on it. But if you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, well, and I guess I related to Gordy the most if I had to pick a character, precisely for that reason. Like you said, Chris, he's, it doesn't make sense with his upbringing. It is different and better until it's suddenly not, and his brother gets killed, and he sees parents that he hadn't before, and that completely flips on him. And I think for me too, what I relate to most is, like you said, Lee, when he's staring down those bullies, that would be me. As a kid, that was me. I wasn't the first to, fight back with my fists, but I would bring that in and internalize it and just stew, and I think that's what the writer does too. They draw it in rather than unleash it out. Right. They do in their writing, but when they do, it's more calculated and more impactful and more dangerous, which is why, at the end with the gun, I thought he was going to shoot him. Like when he said, "I'll just you, Ace," I believed him.
Yeah, totally.
And I think Ace did too.
Yeah.
But getting back to Gordy's fit in this, the gang of his friends, I think the way I looked at it, the scene where they're at the dinner table and he's having the flashback, and Gordy's mom and dad are talking about Dennis's football career, where his next steps are. They're just totally talking, and then Dennis says to the father, "Well, Gordy wrote a story," but the dad just ignores it. He just continues to go on about his son Dennis. So I think maybe he just feels ignored. So he doesn't feel that he fits in, with the football crowd and stuff like that. So yeah, as being a writer, he's not really just into that stuff. He's more into more of the writing and English, and doing reading stuff like that. But
well, there's nothing more inspiring than your mother, your father telling you to be something that you absolutely don't want to be.
Exactly. That'll work.
Maybe all of us have been there at some point.
Or them not identifying the uniqueness of each individual. Like, I think that's the thing, too, of just, not only, trying to push you into being something you don't want to be, but also, comparing you to, another. Comparing you to their siblings or another family's kid or whatever. And not understanding the uniqueness and, the pluses and minuses, pros and cons that each individual brings.
Right.
It seems like in a small town, too, that athletics have such high importance that maybe you're basically the star of the town when, you know, like Dennis was, you know, for several different, you know, like stops along the way. I mean, you know, these, you know, the shopkeeper's just like, well, I remember your brother Dennis, he was awesome at this and this, blah, 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 you know, and.
What do you do? I'm a writer. Oh,
yeah. Oh, okay. Whatever.
Fuck writing,
but
right?
your brother was totally awesome at throwing that football.
Yeah. I think that's a trope too that you see in a lot of stuff like Varsity Blues or Friday Night Lights, all those kind of things where like in those small towns, especially in the South, where like it's a one sport thing and it generally tends to focus around football where like they run the town, like especially if they're good. It's really interesting, because I was going to go back to that scene in the shop too, where Gordy goes to buy the food, and the first thing the town or the storekeep asks is, "Hey, aren't you whomever, whatever boy, Dennis?" Yeah, Dennis's brother, and it's just, again, I feel like he never gets what's his.
Yeah, and you know, he totally misses his brother, you know, and he's constantly reminded how great his brother is. Well, he already knows that, you know. You know. He knows that and stuff, but you know, and he's 12. He doesn't really understand. His mom and dad haven't really talked about it, obviously, because they're just ignoring.
Just shut down. Yeah.
Just shut down and ignoring everything. So.
Yeah, that mom is vacant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for me personally, I feel like this is where like the movie like really like kicks off for me. So this is we get the scene with them like walking down the tracks, and you get. Oh wait, let me backpedal quick. So this before they regroup to go on their adventure, was like Gordy meets up with like Chris again, right? We get the gun, so like this is where we know that he has the gun or whatever, and they shoots it off, and like just like they're behind some cafe, right? Then like they shoot the gun off. They're like, holy shit, like it's loaded, right? And they take off.
Lighting cherry bombs back here.
Right.
I actually love that Chris was just shouting out his friend's name.
Right.
That's Gordy LaChance. Gordy LaChance.
That will get you both killed today, son.
I didn't hear his address, but
right.
You know.
He left his ID behind. But yeah, then after that, then on the tracks for me, this is real. I feel like the story really kicks off with like them going on tracks, and you get was that Teddy Duchamp, right? His kind of confrontation with the train on the tracks, and because it was like his father, right, was in World War II, right?
Yeah, his father was in World War II.
Like kind of right. So
he stormed the beaches at Normandy.
Yeah,
Chad.
Yeah.
So you do hear that.
You do hear that,
times, yeah. Which it's like everybody knew that too, but you know, since he basically had PTSD, you know, and didn't know how to handle it, you know, he ended up.
I mean, again, knowing that this is how old this movie is and like when it's supposed to be set in, I mean, I'm sure we now have so much additional thoughts and resources and just research on PTSD and what it is and how it shows itself and presents itself. It's easy to see and make the connection that Teddy's dad is like the town psychopath or the town crazy, because he probably is like struggling with something and they just don't know the words or the language to use around it, which is really sad.
Yeah. You know, and a little note with Teddy too. He still loves his dad.
Yeah.
I mean,
after like
even after
burning his ear.
I was gonna say, it seems like maybe Teddy's got a little PTSD too.
Well, right, like how that is like kind of transferred
honestly,
that to it. Yeah,
like 100%.
Yeah. Teddy needs some help.
Yes,
for sure. And
Teddy
we find
needs
this
a school
out.
psychologist.
I think we find this out right away.
Yeah, definitely.
The staring down the train.
Yeah.
Well, so. Where he's gonna dodge it.
But even like I feel like even at the beginning in the treehouse when they're playing cards, like they're kind of the banter between the two, like you can tell like there's just like I think another thing that I love about this movie is I just feel like the writing of this movie was really, really well done, of like making it seem like these kids are really like more mature for their age. And like it wasn't overdone in the way you're like, oh, like it doesn't feel real or it feels like they're trying too hard or overreaching. Like to me, like I felt like the stuff that they were saying like is absolutely what these kids would be saying and the way they'd be talking about it. But I feel like even early on in that poker game, the way they're bantering and they're taking the piss at one another, you can tell like they both are a little unhinged and like detached.
Yeah, again, overall, just right from the get-go, this movie is just excellent storytelling, though, from the get-go, and I feel like it doesn't really falter throughout. So after that...
I believe the screenplay won an Academy Award.
It did?
I believe so.
All right.
I'd buy that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so would I.
And I think I read, too, that Stephen King, maybe when he did a screening of it, so at that time, he said that this movie was the best movie, or how did he word it? Was the best movie adaptation made to one of his stories that he had seen at that time.
I saw that too.
I'm looking it up right now. It was a nominee at the Academy Awards for Best Writing Screenplay based on material from another medium. So it didn't win, but it was a nominee.
All right, so after this scene, I think next is where they go and they're hanging out in the junkyard. Right, so I forget what. So they're all meeting there, and like, is it like Gordy has to like, or somebody has to go and get like supplies or food? Or...
Basically, when they're on the tracks heading towards the dead body, they realize that nobody has brought
anything.
Vern
was supposed to bring it, right?
Yeah,
right.
And
Vern's idea.
Yeah. So basically, they realize, well, shit, we're gonna need something. So yeah, they come across the junkyard. They felt like this was maybe a good place to stop, to take a rest. And I think also part of it was that it wasn't too far from the general store.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
They also refilled canteens.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, yes.
So, and this is where we get like, these are some kind of iconic scenes for me. So they do like the coin flip, right? And they all flip tails. So it's Goocher. It's a Goocher. Right?
That was it, Goocher.
It's like no one believes in moons and Goochers anymore. And I tried to do some like research on that, and like there wasn't really anything out there. I guess that was something that Stephen King had just made up. I don't know if you saw it in like your reading of like the book at all, but
I didn't get to the junkyard yet, but I have no problem believing that's something from his Stephen King brain.
It sounded, I looked it up too, and the only thing I got was it was something specific to this story.
Right.
So maybe it was something that Stephen King had used when he was a kid or something.
Right.
I don't know. That I'm not sure of.
So that then
it's pretty cool though. Goocher.
Then like the whole junkyard scene and them leaving, and like the I feel like these are like the legends and like stories like you growing up as a child kind of come in, like the story about the guard dog Chopper, right? And it was like Chopper, sick balls, right? It's just something that they feared hearing, but like so when they're finally like he comes back, right? Notices like the gang is gone. Gordy comes back, the gang is gone. Then like the junkyard guy is there, sees him, right? And like six Chopper on him. And I don't remember what the junkyard guy actually says, but Gordy is like, I know he said this, but all I heard was Chopper, sick balls.
Now he said sickum boy, but what I heard was Chopper, sick balls.
That whole scene of like running to the fence, but I just thought it made me think of like just like these like, growing up as a child, just kind of like these urban legends. Like you don't know if they're true or not, but everyone.
Yeah. Well, Gordy starts screaming.
Yeah.
As he's running.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I mean that takes me back to the what is the movie that I'm thinking of right now? The Sandlot, where similarly they've got the dog that is just, again, everybody knows of as being huge and a beast and a monster and what have you, and then it ends up being just a really nice, kind dog. And like I think those kind of things, especially in small towns, I feel like happen all the time, where you hear these things and these rumors happen and they just continue to build and build and build.
So we have the junkyard scene, so they get out of there, and now we have the scene coming up where they are crossing.
Can I say one more thing about the junkyard
sure.
scene? Did anybody notice that these kids can flip coins like pros? They're just like, I mean, they must flip coins for everything. They're just like, I don't know. That was one thing I noticed. I was like, whoa, right. I'm impressed. That's way better than I can do.
Yeah, it was take away the internet, and I tell you,
right?
You can flip a coin like
completely synchronized too, right?
Yeah, they were just like, yeah.
All right, anyone else add on junkyard scene? Chopper sick balls.
I mean, the junkyard scene to me, the Chopper sick balls is less memorable. I think like the beauty of the junkyard scene for me is at the very end, the confrontation between the junkyard guy and Teddy. Like, and I just think like that is just, to me, it's a really powerful and impactful scene. Like that's where you really get to see and hear a little bit more about Teddy's background and learn a little bit more about his dad and like what he was gone through. And just like Teddy has this, like, again, even though his dad has done some terrible, terrible things to him, like he has this like undying and unwavering loyalty, which is just really interesting to think of, because from my experience, like if that were me, like I would just like, I wouldn't have that. Like I would hold so much resentment towards that man. But it's interesting to see him continue to stick up for his father, even though he's done some shitty things, and like just the willingness to also just give two shits about authority, or like the idea that he's talking to an elder that and he's just, you know, calling him names and really getting at him.
And the thing with the junkyard dealer, he just gets mean at the end. I mean, it's just, you know, it's not even like, well, I'm just going to tell your parents, but I'm just going to single you out because I think you're just shit. For, you know, basically just poke the knife in them, you know. It's just ridiculous.
I think that's what stood out the most to me too. It's just the way that he's talking to children.
Yeah.
Like,
I couldn't even imagine myself talking to kids that way.
No.
At all.
No.
And one thing about Teddy, he is wearing like basically army uniform stuff. Like, he's got combat boots on. He has
that green shirt,
like the bag, and like
he's got like the canteen. You know, so I wonder if all this stuff had been his dad's, or he just, you know, I don't know, picked it up. But,
and it seems like he's like reliving some of that like war trauma, like
with his dad, even though he wasn't.
Like it seems like everything for him is
transposing all that into Teddy.
Yeah.
All right. So after that, we are, again, like, so they're crossing the tracks, or crossing the bridge. Again, and that's where we have, like, the rundown from the train, where, I don't know if there's anything special going on there, except for Vern trips and drops his water bottle, right? And, like, he's going to go down the...
I've got a little bit as a former railroader. I know a little bit about this. And... this scene actually makes far more sense to me than Teddy staring down the train. And I guess it's different in the 50s because they were probably not running diesel yet. Those probably were steamers, which were harder to stop, which makes sense. But I can tell you now, if you're running a main line and you see a kid on the track, you're stopping immediately as soon as you see that kid. And I guess it depends on what you're carrying. You know, if you got hazardous chemicals, that's different. But... you know, stopping right away. However, the bridge is something completely different. And it heightened the danger for me too, because there's no way that train's stopping. It goes backwards and forwards, and they got a full head of steam. So you better get out of the way.
Right.
I've stalled out on bridges. Hoffman Avenue Swing Bridge goes over the Mississippi, and the bridge swings open to let barges through. So every time, you know, the barge passes, they have to swing it back to lock it back in. And it's probably like a 10-minute deal before you get the go-ahead to cross the bridge. And I remember there was one time it didn't lock up correctly, you know, and so they had to pull our crew off the train and shove it back so they could get the bridge back in order. But we had to walk, you know, across the remaining length of the bridge, and I can tell you, we had guardrails. Without it, sprinting with a full head of steam away from a train is just a pretty cool scene for me.
It was really cool for me too, because in Faribault we had two trestles. We had one that was actually had the ballast in it, and then we had the other high one without any ballast, so you could see right down through the ties.
Yeah.
They did change it.
They did finally change it. But yeah, when we were like about the same age, we would go down there all the time, and we would cross it. And it was kind of on a curve too, so you didn't really know if a train was coming through. It almost was like the same setup as in this movie. Just like there's that turn where you don't.
Yeah,
there's not mountains or anything like
that.
But it's that the way it turns, like you can't see if the train's coming.
And those trains would come through pretty fast too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like the scene too, and I think one of the things that made it feel more immersive for me was the fact that before they actually like went over, they had the conversation about like does this make sense? Like, should we go 5 miles north and then like come around and like go to the other bridge? Like that to me, like just made it so much more immersive and like feel so much more exciting, like realistic versus like they're just walking across and all of a sudden the train comes. I feel like that seems a little bit more, I don't know, what you would expect from like an action movie. So I loved that piece. It's really subtle, but just that conversation beforehand for me made that scene.
That scene, it was Teddy that was basically giving the speech like we're going to do this and you pussies, you go ahead and go your 5 miles. But after everybody's just like, okay, we'll go across. Yeah. But I love how Gordy was giving him crap after the speech. He's like, oh yeah, you're gonna say that. Well, I'm gonna say this. I can't remember what he said, but
he gets the last laugh though at the end. Well, I guess when we know when the next train's due.
Right.
Yeah.
For me though, I think I would have just started sprinting from the get go. But I guess you'd be fucked if you're behind Vern.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's crawling. He's crawling across.
Yeah. Oh, and then the comb falls out of his pocket.
Oh, yeah. And
then he's just like, no.
He doesn't have any hair to comb.
But he brought it for his friends.
Yeah.
Like Vern's character, like he is the one that like everybody makes fun
Gordy
of, and like they are just like, I feel like Vern is just vying for their affection, like because Gordy and Chris are BFFs, like Teddy's just like the weird guy who doesn't give a shit. Like Vern wants to be so badly a part of this group. Even you look at the beginning at the scene where he forgets the code and they give him like such a hard time about it. Like to me, like that is absolutely something he would do. Is like, oh, like I don't have any hair, but I'm selfless. I'm bringing it for you guys. I love you and I care about you and I want your friendship. To me, actually, that comb falling was like really like, oh no, Vern.
The look on his face.
Yeah.
It's like devastation.
We all had a Vern in our friend group.
Right. Yeah.
Like even,
And if you don't know who that is, it was probably you.
Right. Yeah, it's probably me. It's me. No. But yeah, going back to even the treehouse scene with Vern.
Yeah.
No one's listening to him. He's like, hey guys. Hey, I know anybody want to see a dead body?
Right.
Just everything reaches to a halt. What?
Yeah.
So it's funny.
All right, so after that, then we get the camping scene, then we get some nice bonding moments.
Discover girls.
All right. Mickey's a mouse. Donald's a duck. Pluto's a dog. What's Goofy?
Goofy's a dog. He's definitely a dog.
He can't be a dog. He wears a hat and drives a car. God, that's weird. What the hell is Goofy?
I thought that was a really fun montage where they're talking about like, is Goofy a dog? Like,
yeah,
maybe
right.
Like,
I know, like
I
gets
thought,
really deep. And
yeah, I thought it was like in like the line just before that was like, stuff that like is so meaningful at the time, but like it really means nothing. Like, but it was like when you're 12 years old, like these are the most important conversations you'll have ever had.
Right.
And then just to see how mundane and banal they were was really interesting. I thought that was a really fun montage.
That's a Reddit thread now,
Yeah.
That
right.
Super important deep dive.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you have something, honestly?
I think that was...
That's also the scene where they do the story, right? At the end?
Oh, yes. Yep. This is
where they ask Gordy
to tell the story of, what's the kid's name?
Lardass?
Lardass.
Yeah, what was his name?
No, that was his name.
Lardass.
He had a name.
He
No.
did. I don't.
He did have a name.
No, it was just
I don't
Lardass.
remember his name. Though.
Newcomer to the fight, but one we expect great things from in the future, young Master David Hogan.
He did.
It's like Prince, you know, just
Firmly, the artist formerly known as
yeah, Lardass.
Lardass.
What would happen, seriously, if you drank that much castor oil?
I don't know. Yeah, probably vomit and shit yourself.
Oh God.
Yeah,
You done that before, right?
a couple times. But no, I never, and I think we should get into this a little bit, but like I never loved that story. And I think they do a good job of like that is absolutely a story that a 12-year-old would tell. And I also understand the portion of like driving home the narrative and the idea that Gordy is a writer and he's like the creative one in the group and all that. But like, I feel like if that story was not in this movie and they just cut it, I would feel like nothing, like I didn't lose anything. How do others feel?
I kind of feel the same, but I do recall like the first time I watched this movie. So I watched it probably a year after it came out. So I was probably 10-ish. I do remember that being like a memorable scene. Like when I was like a kid talking about this movie, like we talked about the Lardass scene, but in rewatching it now, it doesn't seem. Yeah, the movie probably could do without it, but I feel like it does.
I wonder if it.
Like,
I don't know. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was just wondering if it doesn't get into Gordy's character a little bit just by telling the story. It's almost like a revenge story against people that wronged Lardass. The whole time, and then he gets his revenge. I mean, with coming up with the plan and doesn't really care if he wins the pie eating contest
but everyone's cheering him on. Lardass,
Yeah,
Lardass, Lardass, Lardass.
On his fifth pie, and then the former pie eating champion
threatens him,
trips him on the way up to the stage.
Right. But he like threatens him too, like behind the stage, right?
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? And he was the first one to get it too.
Again, another adult like threatening.
Yeah.
Kids.
Oh, it's a theme throughout.
Right.
It is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't say. I like the trick. I like the scene itself, as we talked about kind of before, the story within a story, because I was completely sucked in. Like I was at the fair, at the pie contest, forgot about the boys. So I like that. The story itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could take it or leave it.
It could simply have been a different story.
But I like your idea with it being more of a telltale sign for Gordy's character, because you think too, like Gordy's hanging out with the so-called losers of the school or of his grade or whatever, and like again, like he's the one that is kind of sticking up for these kids. And you look at the final scene too, where he's the one who again ends up like being the protagonist and the hero and sticking up for like the people who can't stick up for themselves. I think that's a fair theory. I like that a lot. I think that makes a lot of sense.
There's something else. It was after the story, what Teddy said. Teddy, he goes, why not have Lardass shoot his father and run away and join the Texas Rangers?
Right.
Something good like that.
That became the script for Natural Born Killers.
And Rob Reiner in the commentary is like, Teddy's, he goes, the character, but Teddy is not aware of any psychological problems with himself when he says that. So that was the director there. Yeah, he's got some issues, Teddy.
Yeah.
But
I had that friend too.
I think we all did.
Yeah.
For sure.
Better to have as your friend than not, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
How about the whole scene where they're standing guard because they're scared of all the wolves and the crickets and everything else?
Yeah.
With Vern.
I think that's actually my favorite part. That's when Chris tells Gordy about the milk money, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I think that's my favorite scene, because that, Chris, like you were saying, they're dealing with these complex issues for kids their age and kind of speaking above their age. And that's why that scene really pops for me, because it's Chris realizing just how fucked up adults are. And that's like the childhood in him was like, I didn't think that was possible, that Mrs. What's her name kept the milk money for herself.
But I also like the idea that he continues to struggle with like his place within this too. I think like it continues to talk and continues to kind of toe this line about being from a small town and getting out, and whether or not you're going to be able to, and whether or not like the impact that your family like I'm always going to be a loser because my brother's a loser, because my dad's a loser. Like those kind of things I think are a common theme throughout this. And I think just, again, those complex issues that you're talking about too, is like, it continues to struggle with this idea and tussle with this idea of like, just because my parents or my dad or my brother are whatever, how does that impact me, and how does that then influence who I'm going to be and my potential.
Mm-hmm. And like Chris's potential in the future probably is slim to none, because in the story we hear two adults saying that he's a thief because of that milk money, and he's not the one. Well, he did steal it, but he did give it back. But then that to the lady that ended up taking it. But it's like the junk dealer even called him. Well, I know what you did. You took that milk money, and these are just people that are random too.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's what's gut wrenching, is he learned his lesson and copped to it, and but there was no absolution. He instead learned a different lesson.
That's such an interesting dichotomy too, like of just the idea of I did something wrong, and then I tried to find redemption by giving it back, and then to see the adult who's supposed to be the one that is like teaching us right and wrong, right? Like they're the ones who are supposed to help us navigate the world until we're able to kind of create our moral compass, and to have him at that young of an age see that adult do it. Like, what does that also say about like what is he going to do next time, and like how does that impact the way that he decision makes in the future for those kind of things?
I mean, he could be cynical. I mean, just right now.
Yeah.
I mean, but he's not. So I really don't understand where he gets that, where he doesn't have that cynicism.
There's a grounded.
From that. So maybe Gordy's like that grounding force for him.
Mm-hmm.
But he does become a lawyer, right?
He does.
Yeah.
Chris Chambers.
Yep.
So after this, they're on the way to Ray Brower's body, but they cross like the swamp or like the lake or the pond or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was like a swampy thing.
Whatever, and they don't think it's that deep, and it is, and they get across, and like the leeches scene. Right?
Well, I think like part of the reason that they have all these leeches around them is because they didn't just immediately go across. Then Teddy started like playing, and then like taking everybody else and like dunking them and like those kind of things. Whereas if they had just gone across, would they have had those many leeches? But yeah, the leeches scene for me is, as a kid, I mean, I remember seeing this on like TBS or TNT all the time.
Right.
And that was the scene that was like always the most iconic and memorable for me. It was like,
yeah, I hear you there.
That was the scene that I always think about when I think of Stand By Me.
Interesting.
It makes you terrified of leeches.
I was just
it makes you right.
Well, for a Stephen King story. Oh, sorry, Lee. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say they're big. They're huge.
Yeah, they're huge.
Leeches.
Yeah.
Leeches that big ever.
No.
They're huge.
Yeah.
That was it.
No, I was just gonna say
At the bait shop.
For a Stephen King story, I can't think of any other moments of horror really, but a leech on your dick is horrifying.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
It's iconic when he pulls it off and you just see like the spats of blood and he like passes out. Oof.
I just crack up at that. He just passes out.
Right. in his Grundies.
It's great back.
All right, so right after that, we have the scene where they're finding Ray Brower's body. So when they get there, and immediately afterward, this is when Ace, right, and the gang, they show up. And there's a confrontation with Ace. It's Gordy, right? Pulls out the gun, threatens Ace. They have like the standoff. And this, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, should we? Because they have an argument before this. Chris wants to go back.
Yeah, it's between Gordy and Chris,
Yep.
and I think Gordy's mad. They're all chit chatting. Gordy's by himself by the tree. Chris comes over and talks to Gordy, and yeah, basically Gordy says, "No, we've made it this far. We're finishing this."
Okay, right.
And I think this is kind of the crux of the movie. I think this argument, and then Gordy deciding to go.
Yeah.
I think he's deciding to go, even if the other three don't go.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think too, this is like trying to illustrate like the mood is changing a lot in this scene, and it's getting really heavy. And I think like the idea as a kid, when at the beginning of this movie, to see a dead body is like, it's going to be really cool. Like, we can't wait. It's very like, very light, if you will. And I feel like as they continue again this journey, and they have all these different things happen, and they're having these really like serious conversations, you can just see that the mood's starting to change. And I think this is where like you really see like the seriousness of what they're about to do and what they're about to see is finally starting to hit them. And I think they do a great job when they actually find Ray Brower's body too, to like have them all identify this internally, and then like when they start talking about like, hey, like we should do something with this, and like I think it's more of a like around like the idea of we need to respect what this is. But I agree. I think that this is a really big scene because it helps that mood begin to swing and make it much more heavy, and you see that they begin to change their. It no longer is a funny or fun thing to do to see this dead body. It's become very, very somber and real.
And one thing that I noticed was, see, Chris wants to go back. Vern agrees. Teddy doesn't. And Gordy yells, "Stop it," because they're just arguing. You know, I had a thought. I wonder if he ever saw his brother's body, or if they had a closed casket.
Right.
I had that thought when I saw this scene play out, because he was in a car accident. So I wonder if, at this point, Gordy's actually wanting to see the dead body
for closure
with his brother.
I think that's it.
Because I think he's bound and determined to go.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that's going to stop him. Yeah. And with the iconic scene with him and the gun, it's like he would kill Ace if Ace didn't back off. He was just that determined to protect him also, Ray Brower's body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That's a great point, because that really ties everything in, I think, throughout the movie, with Gordy, I think, being like the main driving character of this story. Not him, his family.
Yeah.
And his brother's death. So
yeah, and
that's an amazing point. Yeah, I never even thought about that.
Yeah, they're all there to reckon with death, but he's done it before, so you know it means more to him than it does to his friends.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's why like Chris wants to leave, because he's like, all of a sudden he's faced with that. I'm going to see an actual dead body. I don't know if I want to do that now.
Right.
The adventure getting to here was just fine for me, but the ending is coming up, and I don't know if I really can handle that. You know, and then Vern too. You know, he's just like, I don't know. I'll just go back with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Teddy he probably hasn't even really contemplated what that's going to be like.
Right.
Yeah, I don't feel like Teddy has a lot of like introspection or self reflection. So my suspicion is he has no idea what he's getting himself into.
Exactly. So.
Yeah. So there's that. So we got the argument. Find the body. We have the standoff with Ace. Then this is where they decide that, you know what, we're not going to we're not going to let them know that we know where the body, or tell where the body is, and they're gonna do it like anonymously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of like leading to the end of the movie, you know. I feel like that quiet walk home. Then I feel like they're kind of just splitting off. So it's like it was like Teddy, you know, they say the goodbyes to Teddy, they say the goodbyes to Vern, and you kind of get that final like goodbye between Gordy and Chris.
As time went on, we saw less and less of Teddy and Vern, until eventually they became just two more faces in the halls. It happens sometimes.
I love the ending to this too. Specifically, yeah, I think like talking again, like that mood changes. I think that's a great way of reflecting it and have it reflected in the movie. But I think too, one of the things that I just really appreciate is this sentiment and this idea of like just so Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club, like he has this line, single serving friend. And I've just always loved that. And this idea of like people have friends that come and go, and like it's for like a specific purpose or reason or time period. In the movie, they begin to talk about like our relationship with Vern and Teddy, like we're never the same. Like we, after middle school, like we just stopped seeing them, right. But Chris and I were friends till the end, kind of a thing. And I always thought that was really interesting because I just, as you know, a 30-something-year-old right now, like I've absolutely seen that in every single one of its iterations of high school to college to one job to another job. And it's just so interesting to see how easy it is for people to come and go into your life. But I know that in the moment it is so meaningful and so powerful and so important. And I think that they do a really good job of showing that in this movie of like, these are the closest and the most like closest friends that you can have. And it's very easy then for them to just go out of your life.
Yeah, for me, like coming back to this movie, I don't know if it's like after having kids, if this was like part of it, but ending on that line of like, I never had any friends later on, like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone?
It's an amazing line.
Yeah. Like I was just watching on my phone. I had to pause it. It just was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if like, I mean, obviously wasn't going to have that feeling, that emotion, like when I was watching this as a child, but I think that just perfectly wraps up this movie. Like, it's just so perfect, great storytelling. Like, I feel like myself can tell a story almost similar to this, and it's not because it's a great story, but the story is so great at telling like it's almost like this is like I feel like it's the changing from being like a child to adolescence to like that's that tipping point where you start becoming like more adult. Yeah. Like we're kind of entering that adult world or whatever.
It's like you're becoming more self-aware.
Yes.
Without the responsibilities of an adult yet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like those kind of like coming of age stories, like I'm a sucker for, period. Like I know that like about myself. Like I just love that. But like where you have a group and they grow up too fast and it what have you. But that line alone, I think just I would be surprised if everyone, like if there's somebody that can't relate to that line in some way. I agree. I think it is the perfect summation of the movie. And I think one of the things that makes this movie so good is it's relatable. So much of this movie is relatable. Yeah. And I think to me, that is just one of the shining moments. So looking at IMDb for this movie, specifically the box office. So again, this movie was released November 16th, 1986. It had a budget of around $8 million. It ended up grossing $52 million domestically. So in its entire run, it grossed $52 million. The opening weekend, it grossed $242,000. So it's not bad. And knowing that a budget of $8 million and they ended up grossing 52,
and it still continues to make money.
Oh yeah, I mean
Yeah.
they have to still be getting royalties. I mean this is still.
Yeah, I just bought a Blu-ray copy of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, right there. Oh, the song "Stand by Me."
Yeah.
It's originally called "The Body."
Yep.
So the song, they knew they were going to use the song in the movie, and they decided, Rob Reiner and company producers, they decided to use the title.
No.
And one quick fact about the song, a couple facts actually. Benny King is the one that wrote it, sung it. It went to number 1 in 1960.
Oh.
And when they used it in the movie, the same song went to number 1 again, and 25 years later, it's the only song that's ever done that.
Wow.
So
I think that was the right choice. Stand By Me is far better than The Body.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love how there's like that song is constantly being played throughout the movie too. Like the chorus of that song.
Yeah. Well,
it's like a different instrumentation of it or whatever, but
like in the very first scene,
yeah,
the song is being played.
Yeah, as he's sitting in the car, like
yep.
Yeah.
Different instrumentation, orchestration. I'm not sure how to say it.
Boom, baba, boom, baba. Boom, baba, boom, baba, boom.
Going back to that Barforama scene, so I'm just reading here. In the Barforama scene, all of the actors vomit up blueberries just like Lardass and the other contestants in the pie eating contest. However, nobody in the audience, at least from what is shown, ate any blueberries. However, this is a silly story which Gordy is imagining, and he hasn't got everything right in his mind. So I never thought about that. That everyone in the audience is also throwing up blueberries. Yeah, they're not a part of this. So that's kind of good. I like that. That's funny.
Oh, that's well done.
Yeah, soundtrack.
I thought the soundtrack was really good. It fit the movie. Obviously, it's from that era, which was great. They picked up the songs from the era. It's not a soundtrack I'll listen to, even occasionally.
Yeah, it has its moments.
It does. Is there a song called "Lollipop" on it?
Yeah,
that one I'm not really a
right.
big fan of, but wasn't that song?
It's a great
playing?
scene in the movie, though.
Yeah, what scene was the movie, or what scene?
It's where they're dancing along the tracks, aren't they?
Yeah, they're just singing it.
Oh yeah.
And they do like the.
Yeah. Oh well, speaking of soundtrack, they are singing a song. They sing it several times, and I guess it's a theme song for a TV show.
Have gun will travel reads the card of a man. Yeah, what show is that?
I don't know. I couldn't look that up. I don't know, but it must have been pretty popular with the kids,
Rifleman or something.
It. Oh, could have been, yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe the Lone Ranger. I don't know.
I was thinking like Hi Ho Silver. What is that from?
Lone Ranger.
That's Lone Ranger.
Like that for some reason. That's the tune, the melody makes it seem like it could be that. No clue.
Yeah, it seems like militaristic to me.
All right. Well,
but that's what Vern's singing as he's walking off to his house after the whole adventure.
Yeah, when it's all done and over. Yeah,
he starts singing that song.
Yeah, I think it's a show like that, like Rifleman, or maybe it is.
Yeah, that would have been on
MASH.
MASH.
Well,
that was
been
years later,
but yeah, that would have been later.
Okay, before I close it out, just want to go over some. A little bit of roundtable here in the movie. Just some questions we kind of all had here together, posed. So let's go with question number 1. Which kid does each host relate to most, and why? Let's start with Lee. Let's go the opposite way this time.
All right, I relate to Vern. I'm Vern. And the reason why I feel I relate to Vern most is sometimes I am more quiet. I have a hard time, sometimes people won't listen to me. I know that, but I try to engage, and do things like that. But, I'm not Chris. I'm not cool. Gordy, he's pretty smart, and I'm just, I'm definitely not Teddy. And you guys all appreciate that, I'm sure.
But, All right, how about you, Jamie?
Well, I kind of talked about it in the main show, but I would say Gordy, probably. Just the writer, observations.
All right.
I dig it.
What's you, Chris?
Yeah, I would probably say Vern. I think he doesn't get his credit. I think that he's not always taken very seriously. And that's really interesting. It seems like he's kind of always vying for like the affection of like his brother and like wants to and like the affection of others. So yeah, I would probably say Vern as well.
Yeah, I would go with Vern too. And I hadn't really thought about that until just going around the table here, listening to you guys and just really thinking about it. But yeah, the whole like kind of, sometimes just the whole like just wanting everybody to like you and love you for who you are. I'm definitely, at a moment I thought maybe a characteristics of each of the characters, but yeah, definitely Vern when I get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Bullying, then versus now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very evident that clearly there's not technology at this point. So everything happens a little bit more in your face and direct and with a lot more transparency. I think right now you look at things with cyberbullying and being online and social media and how easy it is to bully and number one, be anonymous, which at the time that this movie was done, clearly it's very difficult to be anonymous unless you're maybe writing a letter, but then I feel like you kind of missed the mark anyways, right? Like, but I feel like, I feel like it's really interesting in that regard. I also don't feel like I experienced a lot of bullying in my high school, so it's hard for me to directly speak to it. But I think the biggest thing I see is just like that there's not a use of technology, that you're seeing them. It is much more aggressive in your face, and they take ownership of the things they do and say.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I think Chris, you really hit it. I think it's now it'll follow you everywhere if you let it, versus then you can, if you're fast, you can run away from the kid who's trying to beat the crap out of you. And I also wonder too if it's not more psychological now than it was back then. Then it was very physical, confrontational, because that's Ace jumping Gordy and Chris in front of in Main Street and taking his hat, and now it's I'm just gonna DM you until you cry into your sheets at home. Mm-hmm. And that's almost more sinister in a way too. It's just, harder, I would imagine, to disconnect and disengage.
I guess I don't really have much to add. Yeah,
I only thought
because I've only experienced the old school way.
Right, versus
yeah,
pretty much same here. Like, I haven't really experienced like any kind of cyberbullying, but I just feel like the first thing I kind of thought about was like the idea now is you can just kind of throw something out into the ether and turn away and not really have any repercussions for it.
Yeah.
But what's out there can it could be focused on one person or many different people, versus like back in the day, like if you said something, you can immediately face retaliation for what you said. Like when you're bowling, like if it's that point to when you back somebody into the corner and that's like the moment, like, you're going to face retaliation for that. So
yeah, I also like the idea that there's that lack of anonymity in back then too. Like right. You think of like the idea of like how like trolling is becoming such a huge thing right. with the internet, and
not
again
like a pseudonym,
you're hiding behind a
avatar.
Username. Yeah, and like when you're bullying, like this is gonna sound stupid, but there's like an honesty to it. Like
right.
There's like there's something pure about it that you don't see now.
Like Jamie, what you're saying is, you can, back in the old days, it was the bully would come up or whatever, and you could just run away. I mean, that was it. That would be the confrontation. That's it. Or stand and, just like whatever, whatever happens. But yeah, you're out on, the playground or whatever, it's like, that's it. But
versus now everyone can see it. could be out there
Yeah.
versus back then it was
Right.
just like who was ever there at that
Yeah.
moment in the experience. But
Yeah. What would this movie look like today?
That's a good question, because I mean, Hollywood, being as stupid as they are, would be like, "Oh, we got 4 girls. Stand by me, too. Let's do it."
Right.
It's like, well, no, that's
No.
not it. But
like, what would the story of 4 boys going out to find a dead body look like today?
yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Well, and
They heard it from like, what would it be? Like I'm trying to think of like the latest like weird meme. Momo. Momo tweeted it out.
Momo tweeted
it
it
was
out,
on a
yeah.
Momo video, right? And they don't know if it's true or not, but they're gonna go like out and they're gonna find this dead body because it was in this Momo like YouTube video, right? That's what it would be.
Yeah, and then all the bullying is going to come from Snapchat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's no actual interaction between the bullies and the kids.
The entire conversation is just
So like you can completely remove like the ace in his gang. Like they're never actually there.
Yeah.
Right,
They just
right.
like
They just send videos
they
and
see like they do a Snapchat when they get to the body, then immediately they get bullied.
Yeah.
Like. Anyway.
Well, that was my favorite part too. Is I remember they're talking about around the fire. This is before Girls when we didn't have anything else to talk about, and cut to the bullies like giving themselves razor blade tattoos. It's like you guys have nothing better to do.
Right.
Like you don't have girlfriends.
Right.
What are you doing?
Whose yard is that?
Yeah. Whose yard is that?
yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
full of junk. Apparently, Rob Reiner said in that area, they, a lot of the houses, were kind of like that. They had junk all over. And,
That's our third car that we don't drive
yeah,
anymore.
yeah. Just park out in the back.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have an answer.
But-
I just thought it
Still
was.
thought and just kind of.
Yeah. Like I said, movie was still phenomenal. Didn't change anything for me, but.
Yeah, I don't know if any of the moms would have enriched it. I think it would have hindered their adventure. Obviously they talked to their parents, as they had to get out of the house for 2 days.
Yeah,
right.
I think that was like really glossed over too.
Yeah, yeah. They I don't even think they showed any.
They
of
didn't.
that.
No,
Yeah.
they created the plan in the treehouse and then they executed off.
Yep, they just
off camera.
Right. Well, and I think it is ultimately a story about dads and becoming men, and I think that's probably why.
Yeah.
I did also read somewhere too that someone was saying that this is pretty much like a guy movie anyway, and a lot of women that had seen this movie really did not think it was a great movie. But I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but that was probably just one blurb. I don't know who wrote it.
Yeah,
I just
it
remember
is
reading it.
interesting. A lot of women that I've chatted with about this movie have liked it, but I do think yes, it is much more. It is much more a social commentary on masculinity than
But if there's that is like if you wanted to say like, oh, what was it like growing up as a boy and like your guy friends like having conversation, that's like pretty much it.
Yeah,
that's like
yeah. And that's why it's so good.
Yeah. Then finally, Richard Dreyfuss is credited as the writer, not as Gordy in the credits. Did the events in the film really happen, or did Dreyfuss make them up? Any feelings on that?
I love this idea. Like, I read this question, and it just got me thinking. I think it's a really, really neat idea. Ultimately, I would probably argue that the events in the film did happen, just based on the final line. I mean, it is very like he has that moment, that pause too, after he writes it, where you can see him just reflecting on it. And I mean, maybe one could argue like he's reflecting on how good this story is that he just made up.
Right. I think he could.
But I think he's reflecting on like how much that line how meaningful that line is to him as well, and like that's that experience. And again, like, do you ever have friends as close as you do when you're 12? Like, no, you don't. Like. But I love this. Like, this is such a great like conspiracy theory line. Question.
Because you can't.
It's so great.
Because after we had that conversation about this, he posed this question, And I went back and I rewatched it again. And from the very first scene when he's sitting in that truck, and he's like, he looks at the story in the paper and he sees the kids roll by. I was like, yes, he did just make up the story. Right? It's like that was like the beginning of it right there.
Regardless, I like it. I'm so intrigued by this question because, like, absolutely. Like, I was just talking to a friend who is a creative writer, and she's like, yeah, basically, I really love history, and I want to like do a creative story, and I'm just struggling to find out what. So what she wants to do is cut out like newspaper clippings and articles and just throw them in a hat and choose 3 and then try and tie them all together. And that's what made
that's totally what conspiracy theories.
Exactly. Yeah. But like the idea of like, oh, he just read that, he saw these kids. How do I tie it together? I think that's brilliant.
Isn't that InfoWars?
That's totally something Alex Jones would do. That's what he had to do when Obama became president, because he was doing nothing but hating on the Bush administration.
I got frauds, homophobia, and ridiculous things to say.
Yeah. We can go on forever about him.
Yeah.
All right. So for me, kind of final thoughts. Again, I love this movie. I think it is really well written. I think it is a really relatable movie. I love the last line. I think it's a great way to finish it, and then going right into Stand By Me. I know one of the things that I think that I really appreciate about the movie is the emotional feeling that I get every time I watch that ending. It is a very like visceral gut reaction of like, oh, jeez.
It's like the same every time.
Yeah. Like it's like Almost Famous for me. Same thing. Like every time I watch the ending of Almost Famous, I just think of like, oh God, like it just makes me feel something.
Right.
But no, I think it's a great movie, and it's been really well done. And like I actually think like it has held up pretty good for the most part. So
yeah, I just have a lot of Stephen King thoughts. I'm a huge fan. That was probably the first author I was monogamous with, if that makes any sense. I wanted to read all of his books and, follow his writing and work in movies. And yeah, I just wanted to point out too that for big King heads, they're in Castle Rock, which has implications that we really don't have time for now. But that's kind of the extended King verse. It's Derry and Castle Rock. Those are 2 towns of his where a lot of his stories take place. And I think it's hard to pick a favorite movie that's a King story, but this one's definitely up there, and it stands out because it's different. It's not full horror. In fact, it's little to none, which is a good reminder that he can just write about people really, really well, and especially kids. I actually found myself thinking a lot about it during this movie, and just the way that grown-ups can be absent from people's lives, and there's almost a hint of evil there. It really explores that evil, whereas I think Stand By Me just explores the disconnect, and both are heartbreaking in different ways. But no, for me, this movie is damn near a masterpiece. I love it. I would say buy it, rent it, watch it as many times as you can, and it's a great film.
I wholeheartedly agree. This movie is a masterpiece. The first time I watched this, it was probably back in the late, it might have been 1989 when it came out. I probably watched it on VHS. And there were certain things that I enjoyed about it, the kid's adventure and this and that. And it was, pretty crazy seeing the body. Now that I've seen it, now that I'm older, again, it's there's so much more to this movie that I didn't see the first time. It just having a more adult perspective on what is transpiring with these kids, because when you're 12 you don't really see what's going on with yourself. You see it after the fact usually, and I think that's basically the writer, his character is allowing the adults to see what's going on, and he's writing from memory and this and that. Stephen King really I agree, totally different story than what he normally has written. I've You know, I'm aware of The Shining and several other Stephen King novels, and some of there seems to be, and not every single novel Stephen King's ever done or movie, but there's always a kid adult element to it. To, you know, a lot of his stories, Shining has that, but there's several other stories where, Carrie's one that the relationships there are just, you know, the adult child relationships are so fucked up. You know, it's just, you know, you've got this, you know, thing, you know, girl. But anyway, getting back to Stand By Me, this one, I truly believe this one holds up today. I mean, just even as well as 89. I mean, I would say that this one is definitely one of the only timeless movies. It's one that we could watch 100 years from now and still understand what's going on in it and not have any questions, you know, with what people are doing. Maybe certain technologies or whatever, but, you know, it's just the story and the adventure of what they're doing and the interactions between the four kids. And, you know, just having the element of danger with the older kids, the bullies, you know, trying to keep them from their goal. But they manage anyway to get through that. I just thought that was pretty awesome. They actually won in the end, which was very satisfying to me.
All right. Some great points. Yeah, I just think this movie is timeless. I think if you haven't seen this movie, you have to see this movie. Again, I think like what Chris said, I think we've all had experiences similar to this, not necessarily in the journey, but as growing up, becoming adolescents, like this is all something that should touch or strike a chord with you as a person. So, and this is just example of just great storytelling. So, and that concludes episode 1 of Movie Time Machines Looking to Stand By Me. If you have any likes or gripes, please drop us a message on Twitter at Movie Machine Pod. Again, that's at Movie Machine Pod. Thank you very much, and good day.